I'm Dr. John Zeisel. I believe that staying engaged in our communities, that continuing to learn, and that knowing we can make a difference, hope, are the secrets of successful aging. Welcome to Hopeful Aging. My mission, and this program's mission, is to create a life worth living for all of us as we get older, including those with cognitive challenges, by enriching lives and offering hope. Our guest today is Alban Maino, founder of Memory Lane TV. Welcome.
Thank you, John.
Memory Lane TV, what's that?
Memory Lane TV is a multimedia, multisensory collection of plot-free films targeted for people suffering from dementia and their caregivers. And the idea resonates with everything that you're doing, John, when you say that everybody living, or everybody who gets older deserves a life worth living, even with cognitive decline. I felt that when I was personally confronted to Alzheimer's disease, that we needed to create more tools to improve the quality of life of people living with dementia.
So we could spend 3 hours just discussing what you just said. So I'm going to pick a few of the things. Plot-free. What does that mean, plot-free, and why is that important?
Well, because of the very essence and the nature of the pathology itself. You know, I often refer to the Professor Agid, who is the former scientific director of the Brain Institute in Paris. And he said something I think that is very important. He says people living with dementia we need to open their minds. They need to feel, to hear things, to listen. They need to perceive things. And what is important for us is even more important for them. But to go back to what you were just saying, as the disease of the pathology and Alzheimer's advances, it is really hard to follow a plot. And television or media or in general are creating the exact opposite of what we're trying to do with it. And so when I was confronted to the very essence of that, I realized that we needed to create very specific programs and that we could even go much further than that. We could use those programs to alleviate some of the symptoms of the disease. And by plot-free, I mean that there is no narration, no voice-over, no plot to follow, and they're divided in what I invented, sort of, what I created, what I like to refer to as a dream scene. And a dream scene generally lasts 1 to 3 minutes, and they're assembled in sessions throughout the day. They follow the circadian rhythm of the day, so we have different scenes in the morning, in the afternoon, or in the evening, and you can fall in and out of it without having to follow a specific plot.
So I watched a little bit of some of these programs, and one I saw had cats, and the cats were doing things.
Yeah.
And I sort of thought there was a plot there, a beginning, and maybe it was just 2 minutes, but the cats were playing, and then they were doing something else, and then they played again, and so is that not a plot?
Well, you're right. There is what I refer as a plot is a complicated narrative that you have to follow in order to get in and out, like a story that you would get from the news, which most of the time produces anxiety, or a fiction, or even a series where you'd have characters that you don't know who they are and that after a few minutes you lose of it. But
so even a movie that's an hour and a half long, you have to remember halfway through that these two characters were fighting with each other and now they're friends to make sense of it. And that's a plot that might require different kind of memory skills.
You're absolutely right. And not only half of the movie into, but even a few minutes in. Right. Because of the very nature of the disease. But what you're saying is very important in the sense that they're not plot-free, but they're always engaging. So we do use scenes of nature sometimes to dream and meditate and take our viewers outside to see the leaves falling in the seasons.
Yes.
But what you're inducing by those little cats, for example, there is something happening. And they're playing with each other. And just like we like to look at people when we travel or look at these types of scenes, people that are confined in their own world, in their spirits, need to have this to dream, to think about something else.
But what you're saying is that the plot freeness takes away some of the burden of this long narrative, which we probably have to work hard to keep up with as well. It's just that we're used to keeping up with it. And so, you know, an hour later, if we go out to get some coffee in the middle of a TV show or a film on TV, so we have to come back and say, well, what happened when I was gone? Because otherwise you lose the plot.
Absolutely.
Right.
And, you know, we've produced over 150, 200 hours of content that follow the rhythm of the day, the changes of the day. And
let's talk about that. So tell me, when you say the rhythm of the day, I was about to say I don't mean to interrupt you, but
no,
I did
do
mean to do that.
Please.
So let's take that rhythm of the day. How do you see the rhythm of the day? Let's start with that. And then how might these programs fit in or be modified to mirror that? So what are when you say the circadian rhythm, but let's say the types of engagement during the day.
Right, types of engagement is a very important clue. You know, I like to think and make the analogy, and I consider that people that, and we've discussed that together in the past, that are living with dementia are just like us. So the routines that we have in the day, we wake up and we have coffee or tea or whatever we drink in the morning, and then we either do exercise, we meditate, or we go straight to work, and our day follows a certain rhythm. In France, where I come from, we have a big lunch, and then a long lunch, and then in the afternoon we try to work, and then in the evening we calm down from the stress of the day. Well, this is exactly what we refer as the circadian rhythm, which is basically a complicated term to say that we follow the different stages of the day to either get people engaged with what they're doing and helping them with that tool, with a multisensory tool. And for example, in the morning when you have coffee, and when I'm talking about multisensory, the smell of coffee is important in the morning. And we use small devices that also helps people sometimes to remember that smell of coffee. But if we're talking about the media and the images that we use, in the morning we're going to see sceneries of the morning, the sun rising up, the little birds chanting to you, and they would all be plot-free, that would give you elements that, oh yes, this is the morning. Things are not necessarily engaging. And when we're getting to that lunch time, people, all of us, we need to feel engaged, and we feel like we need to go out and lunch, and we need to feel hungry. So we're not in a stressful situation necessarily, but we're going to follow a wave with our programs that will leave people excited, and we might show cooking shows, we might show people at the market, we might show elements that will leave people on a high, or songs that are related to this type of activities. In the afternoon, when we are getting engaged, maybe it's more occupational therapy. We need to do something.
Well, occupational therapy meaning that's a technical term.
It's a technical terms, meaning that we want to have activities, fun activities to do, and to interact, and we can do reminiscence. And the caregivers and the partners, the care partners, I like to call them, that are living with people with dementia, they need to interact, and we need to find ways to interact. And we have, when we're not professional caregivers, as the one that we know in institutions, we need to have specific tools, and people are not prepared for that. How do you communicate? So
what would an example be of something, an afternoon engagement scene? It wouldn't be the little cats running around.
No.
It wouldn't be the bird song. It wouldn't be the shopping at the market. What might that be?
For example, it would be making an apple pie. So how do you make an apple pie? What are the elements that you need and ingredients that you need into making an apple pie? Where do you collect the apples from the apple orchard? And what happens with the crust?
So this would be a series of scenes
Series of scenes.
where you'd be in the apple orchard and people might be picking them, and then the next thing might be in the kitchen cooking them. Is that
That's exactly
sequence?
it. That's the sequence of it. And we've measured the attention span, and generally, to keep people engaged, it lasts between 20 to 30 minutes. So after those 20 to 30 minutes of people watching those different scenes, we would offer activities related to the activities. We would bring an apple pie. So for that specific day, let's bring an apple pie and let's engage the people that were watching the films. What is your secret
So
recipe?
you would suggest to the care partners to make an apple pie once in a while.
Right, or buy one
Or
at their
buy one,
local
right.
patisserie, but also to engage. What did you make apple pie in your childhood, or do you have a special? Do you add cardamom to it? Oh, is this how you made an apple pie? And there
This
you.
sounds to me like it's a whole program of questions and answers, and it's not just watching the television.
No, ideally, I would like to take the television out of this element, but the television and the medias and the screens in general are central to our everyday life. And for people living with dementia, for example, who have hear and visual impairments, it needs to be big and simple and straightforward. So the programs that in the afternoon deal more with activities are much more than that. And that's why I insist on the multisensory aspect of it. I mentioned a little bit of the smell, the importance of scent, the direct pathway to the brain, how we all remember the famous Madeleine de Proust when we eat something, or memories that attach to a specific place, or music. The importance of music and memory has been described.
So just to clarify, so the author Proust wrote a book called Time Lost, and in it he starts the whole book, I think, or the series of books, saying that he visited his grandmother. Whenever he visited his grandmother, they got these little cookies called Madeleine.
Correct.
And the book starts with him tasting one of these cookies, these Madeleine, and saying, and that generates all these memories coming back to him of his life and his grandmother and his relationship to her.
And that's exactly what I've been working on over the past decades to reproduce this type of event and manifestation of what we can do with multisensory stimulation. I mean, Oliver Sacks has been describing for decades the importance of music and memory, and how we are affected by music that we listen at one moment in our life, and what it generates into people, even with severe dementia, how it can recollect images and entire songs can come out to life. And music is an important element, crucial element in reminiscing, but there are many others.
So we can do that. So we play the music once.
Yeah.
Do you have to have, for 365 days, 365 different pieces of music or different pieces of video to get people to be involved with this?
Well, the beauty, one of the beautiful aspects of the evolution of technology these days is that we can customize to a certain extent some of those contents. So by doing a very simple assessment and by knowing what type of programs people like and even the year they were born, we can customize some of those elements. So if you were born in 1945 and on the coast of Maine and you like polka, we're going to be able to push different types of content that will resonate. But what you're saying is very important, especially with music and multisensory stimulation. When we find something that can trigger an emotion or a positive emotion, we can reproduce it. And that's the beautiful aspect of Alzheimer's disease. It's not only negative, it's a yin and a yang, just like everything in life. We can reproduce a positive, and I get really emotional when I think about that, because I've seen it happen so many times. Once you can trigger a positive emotion into someone that's affected by it, you really can reproduce it.
So let's take the polka. We play the polka for someone who might have had polka music in their past. And what happens? They get involved, and then the next time, what happens then?
The next time, it's like the first time. The next time, they rediscover or realize that they enjoy it, that they enjoy that rhythm,
Yes.
Sometimes they even get up and start dancing. And it's always a new discovery. And you can do that with different types of music that are really close. And the caregiver is a really important element. You know, I also designed Memory Lane as something for the caregivers and
Yes.
primary for the caregiver. There is an aspect of some of our programming is education of the caregiver channel with specific content on how do we redirect attention, how do we deal with different types of anxiety and panic attacks.
Yes.
But using the knowledge of the history of the person that we love because we know them is an essential tool. Because if you know that if your mother or your loved one or your partners loved to take big walks in the forest, well, I have a series called Taking a Walk Down Memory Lane.
Yes, yes.
And we can go and take a 20-minute walks in the forest and look at the birds and look at the leaves and look at the trees.
You said something that we might discuss a little bit more. You said that each time they see or hear this music, it's the same. It's new. In my work, we find that people with dementia actually learn things, and they learn things. It's called procedurally, by doing them over and over and over. And so, actually, one of the things that might be happening when you show someone the same polka music the 10th time is that by the time they get to the 10th time or 4th time or 5th time, they actually remember that, and they can then say, oh, I know what's going to happen next. They develop an awareness of the plot.
Right.
And an awareness of the music, and they start to remember the music comes along with dancing to it.
Right.
and stories that go along with it. So maybe it's not new every time, maybe it might be new the first time, but the 5th time they're actually experts in it. They go, I know what we're doing here.
Right.
And that's a very good feeling too. It doesn't have to be a new time. It
Right.
can also be a time of saying, I know something.
And
I've
it's
learned
reassuring,
something.
isn't it?
It's reassuring.
To know that something is going to happen and to feel good about what's happening. There's an element of reassurance that is very important in
Yes.
what you're saying. Yes.
Yes.
I agree.
Now, you have great passion, obviously, in the way you describe what you're doing. And so where does this come from? Where did this all start? Because this isn't merely an exercise, a business exercise. It sounds to me like it's also an exercise in giving back to the world. So things have happened in your life to bring you to this stage. It's not just, oh, I think I'll do this.
No, my voyage with palliative care started a long time ago, in my early 20s. I lost my brother from a degenerative disease and was one of his primary caregivers.
Oh, wow.
And he lost his ability to talk, walk, and swallow, and there was no cure for the disease itself. And from that day on, I decided that people...
What's the name of the disease?
It's a leukoencephalitis. It's
a
brain degenerative disease.
Oh.
And I decided at that time that I would dedicate my life, some of it, to help people that are in palliative care.
But you were like 20 years old?
I was 20 years old when that happened.
That's a very powerful situation to go through. That's not easy.
No, it wasn't easy. I think it was even harder for my mom or my mother and my father. I think there's nothing that is harder than losing a child.
Well,
it was
sure
easier
you're
for
right.
me as it was my brother, and we were very close, Florian. And I think that experience really was, just like we were saying about Alzheimer's disease and the positivity of something happening in one's life. That brought a lot to, he brought a lot to my life in many ways. And later on, my grandmother, who was the most generous woman I've ever met in my life, Rosette Josson-Simon, was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease in her late 70s, no, late 80s, I'm sorry. I thought, wow, I can help her. We can help her. There are many things we can do to fight this. And when she looked at me and says, what is this thing that they call Alzheimer's? Alban says, well, it's nothing you need to worry about.
Yes.
And from that began the Alzheimer journey. And we started to
The Alzheimer's
work
journey for yourself.
for myself, for
Yes,
my
yes.
personal journey in that in that ecosystem.
And you remembered the things you learned 30 years earlier with your brother.
Right, the importance of the day-to-day, the mindfulness of every moment that spends, that is a moment that's gained. And we worked hard with, at the very early stage of memory lane, with geriatric physicians, with geriatric psychologists, with nursing homes, nurses, and caregivers at home to really define what is it that you need, what is it, how can we improve the quality of life, how can we make this their life better on a
Yes.
day-to-day, on an hour-to-hour moment, and how do we deal with sundowning syndrome? People who are familiar with dementia and Alzheimer's disease know about the end-of-day stressful anxiety that we call sundowning syndrome, that we can't exactly pinpoint where it's coming from,
Yes.
it's different. But I realized that we could, through very simple ways, redirect attention and appease that without the use of medication necessarily. And memory lane is one of the elements that can bring those tools together.
So you told me earlier that you lived the first 14 years of your life in Nigeria. And you used the term citizen of the world. So
Yeah.
my question is, how does being a citizen of the world jive with, come together with the work you're doing, with how you've lived your life? Because it seems to me that there's the stories you're telling of generosity and of helping your brother, and this whole mission-oriented approach that you have seems larger than just a country or just a city. Is that how it comes together for you?
I think so. I think that very early on I was confronted to extreme poverty in Lagos, Nigeria. Something I was not, I moved there when I was 6 years old, came back when I was in my mid-teens, so I spent quite a number of years there. And
Some would say it's the most formative,
most
6 to 16 is probably
right.
the most formative time of your life.
And I had friends from all over the world. And I always considered myself a citizen of the world. And in my work later on as a film producer, I also thought that it was my duty to get involved in one way or another with social impact missions. I work with Doctors Without Borders, with other institutes and not-for-profit organizations, just to bring my little piece of work to improve the quality of our fellow citizens, and to do what I could do to a certain extent to with my expertise, with my domain of expertise,
Yes.
and being confronted to something that I can do fairly well, which is media producing. I thought that I could, mix both worlds together, and for everyone. There's no gender, there's no race attached to dementia or disease in itself. We're
That's
all
right. So one of
confronted
the
to
things
same.
that happens, of course, is that we now have 50, 60 million people in the world living with dementia. And if each one of those has 5 care partners, family members or whatever, who are involved with them, that's 5 times 50 million, that's another 250 million. I mean, so it's 300, 400 million people we're talking about. But also, there are no national boundaries. It is a worldwide issue.
Yes,
In
it
fact,
is.
one of the reasons, many people ask me why I stayed in this field dealing with the topic of dementia, among others, and I think that's one of them. It impacts everybody.
Right.
It's not just around the corner. Now, it is also very personal. It is your grandmother or the audience's grandmother or spouses or whatever, but what we learn about how to handle our personal issues really it expands and has no limit. It's worldwide.
And not only that, John, but I think it's not limited to the 300 million people that are affected in one way or another, but I don't think I've come across one single time to someone that didn't have an experience with some sort of palliative care, whether it's cancer or a degenerative disease or some dramatic situation. And each one of us who will live to be elder, and we're all getting older and longer
We are.
living, will be confronted, if not within our own, but with people that we cherish, and we all, forget where we've put our keys or the name of our first cousins or things like that, and we associate it with declining. It's a natural evolution of our species, and there are tools and things we can do to help that and to still be happy and dream.
Actually, you're raising an important issue, which is that we're not only talking about somebody taking care of somebody with dementia, we're talking about relationships between people. That really what we need to be doing in every situation is engaging those we are with. Why would I sit with you in a room and I'm looking down and you're looking down? The purpose is to engage each other in some interesting conversation or some memory or some idea. I had an uncle, and somebody once said he brought the best gift to every dinner party. And so I said, well, what is that? He said, a topic of conversation. And what you're really doing with memory lane and what many of these non-pharmacologic approaches to living with dementia is bringing a topic of conversation so that people don't sit staring blankly out a window, but get engaged in thinking about something, talking about something, doing something.
And what I hear very often is it's really difficult to start talking. It's difficult in general to make conversation with people.
That's right.
But so to find topics can sometimes be extremely challenging with someone who's non-communicative. And we've customized some of the films that we do with Memory Lane for people using their own life memory and personalize that with their own pictures and their own videos, their own music, still segmented in 20 minutes films. And every time that a caregiver uses the film with their loved one, their mother, their care partners, it triggers the same type of engagement and conversations. And sometimes it's not necessarily related to the image itself that recalls a place where you've been, but you're right. It says, it's a trigger, oh, what a beautiful sunset. And we can communicate and be in the present moment.
So they are communicative. It's just that they don't necessarily initiate the conversation. So it's up to us to initiate, and that turns this non-communicative person into a communicative person.
Absolutely.
And that's really the magic. And one of the biggest problems we have in thinking about dementia, the world thinking about dementia, is that there are these stigmatized views. They are non-communicative. They can't do things. They can't. And really, if we bring the conversation topic to the table, whether it's through a photograph or through a video or through a memory that we're bringing to them, it does change that person from a non-person to a person.
Right.
And I think that that's one of the important things in what you're doing.
And of course, there are many incredible initiatives. I work, my partners, since I've been in the US, is an amazing nursing home called the Cedars in Portland, Maine, and they have a number of programs. One of them is Opening Mind Through Arts, where they get students from high school or medical schools to interact through art with people living with dementia.
Yes.
And what I found astonishing and fantastic is exactly what you described. It's not so much the art and crafts that happens, but they pair a student with someone that is affected by dementia at a different level, and the interaction that happens, because the person that sometimes doesn't communicate might be the young 16-year-old granddaughter that doesn't know how to communicate,
exactly.
But they're providing tool through art, and Memory Lane is one of those elements that provides something easy to emphasize and to offer respite also. That notion of respite for the caregiver to me was central to my work. It's so important when you're a care partner to someone to get sometimes during the day to cook, to breathe, to relax, because it's a 24/7 burden
Yes,
sometimes. And memory lane does offer that as well.
So really, it's not only for the individual with some cognitive challenge, it's also for the people that are living with that person to make it easier to communicate, but also easier possibly to say, take a look at these lovely, interesting animal and nature scenes while I do something I need to do.
Oh, absolutely.
There's actually a phrase, it's a French phrase, for the object that brings people together, which is objet médiateur, mediating object.
Okay.
And really what you are doing with Memory Lane is saying we need to bring a third element into every relationship. An object that helps to mediate that conversation, to bring that conversation forward. So let me thank you for a wonderful half hour and being a member of this family of hopeful aging, and for bringing the topic of Memory Lane to the table. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Sean, for your
My
work.
great pleasure.
Thank you for having me today.
Thank you all for watching Hopeful Aging with Dr. John Zeisel. The purpose of the program is to not only entertain, but also to be informative. And we hope that you see it that way and participate both in enjoying the conversation, but also feeling that we provide something of information. If you have somebody that you think you might like to see on this program to be interviewed, feel free to to send an email that you will see on the bottom of this program to me, and we will see what we can do to do that. So thank you very much for being with us, and stay well until next time.